They seem to just take the information and roll with it. There's not a lot of pushback. So if, we need samples and we need them by a certain date in order to make the sale, they're almost like partners. They want to make the sale with you.
Welcome to Clothing Culture, a fashion industry podcast at the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm Emily Lane.
And I'm Bret Schnitker. We speak with experts and disruptors who are moving the industry forward and discuss solutions to real industry challenges.
Clothing Culture is produced by Stars Design Group, a global design and production house with more than 30 years of experience. Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Culture. Today, we have another exciting conversation for you. I'm, of course, joined by Bret Schnitker. Hello, Bret. And our very own at Stars Design Group, Michael Lode.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, me too.
Well, today we're taking on a conversation that we've been kind of thinking about a little bit. And Michael just returned from a overdue trip to China. And so we thought this is a really good time to tackle some conversations that we're having almost on a daily basis with many people in the industry.
A massive flight out of China and no place to go, really. Few places to go. Right?
Absolutely. This is a country that has been well set up for manufacturing, and especially in our space of apparel. They still manage about 90% of the apparel manufacturing happening in the world. And, political reasons and various things that are happening in the world, people are making the decision to look beyond. And there's a lot of challenges, of course, beyond what you just mentioned, Bret, nowhere to go, so to speak. But, there's also...
In total, of course. There's places to go, but they can never absorb all of China's manufacturing overnight.
But there's also some things that we really need to look at with regards to some of the strengths of this country. So who better to have this conversation with than our very good friend, Michael Lode, who you've not only spent a considerable amount of time living in China.
That's 10 years.
You've been within factories. You currently really play a pivotal role in being our liaison between our clients, going through that whole production process and communicating with the factories overseas.
And Mike's been in the industry almost as long as I have, I think.
Yes.
30 plus years. So.
Right. So let's take on this very complicated topic. But I do want to start kind of at the beginning, not, the baby years beginning, but let's start at the beginning of, what brought you into this industry?
Into this industry, first I started folding sweaters at a Chess King.
Oh my gosh, that puts a timestamp on.
That was
at that point you said, I love this business, I want to be in it.
I wanted to work at merry-go-round. I wanted to be where the wild people were. So I got stuck with the skinny ties.
Yeah.
So I started out there, and then like most people, worked my way up the ladder to assistant manager, eventually a district sales manager. And at one point, I jumped ship and went into the clothing industry, which was Webster's Menswear. That owned Zeidler & Zeidler at the time. And so I went into men's clothing, and that company was absorbed by Edison Brothers.
Oh, yes, small multi-billion-dollar company, yes.
So I was part of the acquisition. I moved to St. Louis at that point, and I was, I guess, kind of a merchandising planner. Things were set up a little bit differently then. We'd be in charge of what was allocated to the stores.
Lots of numbers.
Lots of spreadsheets. And I think at that point we had one computer per floor.
Right.
And we'd have to sign in and do our spreadsheets.
Lots of manual reports on Monday.
Yeah.
Made folding sweaters sound pretty good at that point.
You'd come in on Sundays just to get ahead of the next guy.
Wow.
So you'd get your reports, so you'd be ready. It was exciting. It was fun. I actually really loved it. And fortunately, I had good mentors who had faith in me and brought me into the buying side. So I first bought men's sports coats and dress pants. And then that exposed me to China.
When was the first trip to China?
I'd have to say that was in 1999, probably.
Okay.
1999 was my first trip with
What was your first impressions?
At that point?
Yeah.
Oh, it was very gray.
Yeah.
It was. It wasn't the China of today.
Yeah.
It was exciting. It was a little mysterious. But I fell in love immediately. My family will say they knew when I came home from that trip that I would be returning to China on a more permanent basis at a later
That's
date.
pretty insightful.
Yeah.
You felt an immediate connection.
Yeah, I loved it.
So you're definitely, like Bret, a lifer in this industry. You've worn a lot of hats. And I know that you have a lot of really close relationships with in China. And we have many partners there that you communicate regularly with. What are some of the things that you love most about working with some of these people in that region?
They seem to just take the information and roll with it. There's not a lot of pushback. So if, we need samples and we need them by a certain date in order to make the sale, they're almost like partners. They want to make the sale with you.
Yeah.
And they will do what they need to do to turn it around. And they've always been very responsive to our needs. And I think we stay as competitive as we do is because of our turnaround. China is very, very quick.
Yeah.
And they have a large assortment of fabrics available, trims, and labor. I mean,
They've built the best infrastructure in the world for apparel manufacturing.
Right. And we were talking earlier about the hours that are worked in China. I was going through some of the BSCI reports and so forth on social compliance, and on average, every factory I had visited the average employee puts in 14 hours of overtime per week.
Yeah.
Which is voluntary. It's not mandatory overtime. It's voluntary overtime because they're there to make a product, make their money, and eventually, retire, buy a home, and open up a flower shop or what have you.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of my early days in retail, those kinds of hours,
And especially around the holidays. Don't miss those Christmas Eves.
Well, we really noticed that trend globally, that a lot of countries, their commitment to their work and their career it's a different expectation overseas than it is domestically here in the United States.
For sure.
Yeah. What do you think are some particular strengths that they hold within this industry? Is it specific category or just in qualities, or what are
quality? And your earlier comment about the flight from China and really nowhere to, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's trendy to say that or if it's political, because I look at my life, and I was thinking about it because we were preparing for the podcast over the weekend, and I've got this Makita drill.
Yes.
And I've had it for 11, 12, 13 years, and it's made in China. And it has dropped 10 feet, 15 feet. It has built multiple decks, fences, or whatever, and it's solid. Dyson vacuum cleaners. Moved production there in 2021. You've got the Tesla battery. Is anyone going to say their Tesla's junk?
Right.
40% of the components are coming from China.
Yeah.
So you look at things like that, and I think it's very naive to say, I'm not going to buy China.
It is.
Because you look at your iPhone, your MacBook Pro. Now, some of this is moving to Vietnam, but still assembly and certain parts are coming from China. So I think it's very narrow-minded to think that way.
Right. Yeah.
Not even narrow-minded, it's kind of short-sighted.
Yeah.
There's no infrastructure built in the rest of the world to be able to pick up where China would be eliminated. We've embraced China's industrial revolution years ago. They've embraced it internally. They've built the infrastructure to a level that certainly our country couldn't. India is the only other country that rivals, they're the number one population in the world today, but China and India are around 1.4, 1.5 billion people. And there's no other place that kind of has that, entire focus on production to the level that China's developed today. And I would go further to say it is politics that's getting in the place. There are certainly some things that we may differ on the point of view from the Chinese government, but it's so funny, over the years that I've traveled, politics kind of sits up here and everyone plays the game, the whole tariff game that, China's going to pay for the tariff that's installed. And as I've said in previous episodes, ask any right-minded economist and tariffs have never worked. Our trade balance is higher in China than it was before tariffs, and the only person that pays the tariff cost is the U.S. customer. China's not paying it. And so, there's other ways to manage politics in a different world, but when you pull all of that back, my experience in Ethiopia, my experience in India and China and Vietnam and all these areas, is on the ground, past all the politics, these are human beings like us that are trying to earn a living, and they're really diligent people. The ones that, there's always good, bad, and ugly in every country, including ours, but the ones that we've had the luxury and the opportunity to work with have really, over the years, helped us be who we are today because they are passionate about their business. Generally, they're passionate about quality, and they really do want to be partners.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the ground, Bret. So, Michael, you had not been to China since before COVID.
October 2019 was my last trip there before last month.
So, what are some changes or evolution that you've seen since your previous trip and now in the post-COVID age and where we are today?
Very clean.
Okay.
They have taken COVID very seriously in the aspect that you have somebody in the mall with a sanitary rag holding it on the banister of the escalators. Attendants in all the bathrooms just mopping, right? It's just clean. They're very adamant about stopping the virus. It's from what I've seen.
Even today, you see this, and where we have kind of all of a sudden just said, oh, well, it exists, but it's not a big deal anymore. And we kind of ignore it as a US population. Some people go further to try to say it was never existent, which is kind of crazy. But, we just walk around and just we don't do anything different anymore. Today, you're saying they're being really still very, very careful.
Yeah, they're still being very diligent about it.
What about from a manufacturing standpoint? What evolutions have you seen since your first trip in the late 90s to today?
A lot of automated machinery. You've got the automated rack systems for knits and so forth now that were all bundled before and pushed on a cart to the next sewer. Laser cutting, pocket cutting, and bag inserts. You've got a collar sewing. It's all automated now. Socks are completely knitted, pulled over, toe sewn, and comes out complete. And then set on a conveyor belt where it's set in the heat. You just have one person now can run 20 machines.
Wow.
And that's China's ingenuity. As labor costs increase, every industrial nation that moves from agrarian to industrialization goes through those periods of lower labor costs, better increased labor rates, increased labor rates, and you have to do something. Either you change from, let's say, apparel to appliances and appliances to technology to keep up with those increased labor costs, or you apply technology. And we always talk a lot about how technology is influencing this fashion industry even more on a daily basis than ever before. It continues to do. And even when you look at China, which has had the highest productivity rates in the world still today on particular line systems, when you add in that hanging system, when you add into some of these other robotic mechanized elements, that increases on that even more productivity, which helps offset some of those higher labor costs.
Well, absolutely. I saw a yoga mat manufacturing facility that was ran by 2 people.
Unbelievable.
Whoa.
Yeah,
and what kind of volume were they?
8,000 mats a day.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is one guy's little business. He makes yoga mats.
One guy makes the mats and the other guy does the prana pose.
You have a guy in the front who's pouring the rubber, and he feeds the mesh. So it goes in this machine, and the rubber bonds to the mesh, goes through just like your normal machines. It gets set and heat sealed, comes out the other side. It goes through a giant razor blade where it's cut in half. So let's say it's 54 inches wide, and you've got a 24-inch wide mat. So it cuts it right down the center, okay? Then it goes through another aspect where it trims the sides, the selvage, off the sides, and then goes to the end and is set for 48 inches or 54 inches, whatever your length is, and is cut. And then you have one person at the end who pulls the mat up, rolls it, puts it in the mesh carrier, puts it in the box. One person at the end, one person at the beginning, and it's
pretty amazing.
8,000 pieces a day.
Yeah.
And, the owner who walks around.
Of course.
So 3 people.
So 3 people run that factory, and there's 1.4 billion people going, what do we do?
Right.
Yeah, robotics is taking our jobs.
Yeah, they're rubbing the banisters in the malls.
Yeah. Or stuck in traffic, more than
Yeah.
likely. Yeah.
So no, it's I just find the people very warm, very friendly. You know, it's I've had factories visit me here, and it's not often I've had them to my house for dinner.
Yeah.
You know, but they've always been very warm and welcoming and very kind. And
So we've talked a little bit about, you know, their really developed skill set and their ingenuity. You know, are there challenges that they recognize in this apparel space that they're looking to solve, or where do we see evolution coming in addition to increased automation in this space?
where I see them aggressively addressing our needs right now is in the lower minimums. I mean, Bret and I have talked.
Yeah.
You can go to Cambodia, you can go to Vietnam. Are you ready to place 200,000 units and guarantee the factory 10,000 pieces a month?
Yeah.
You know, we have partners right now that are helping us help smaller companies
Yeah.
grow to big companies by doing 250 pieces of a style per colorway.
Yeah.
And to me, that's helping the lower rung of businesses here in America grow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, it is a growing trend. People recognize that there's a lot of product out there in the world, that they have a lot of product, and people are wanting to be more intentional about the product that they bring into their home. So I think it's smart to be looking at a model that can do better with less.
Right.
Yeah.
So in approaching, you know, the factories with smaller, you know, minimums and smaller quantities and dye and so forth, they're really aggressively figuring out ways to address that.
Is
How
that
do-
becoming more of a complication? You know, a number of years ago, I think it was pre-COVID, there was a big issue. There's still a big issue there in terms of pollution controls and economics, and they're making inroads, right? But at one point, the number one thing that they did in our industry in general is they eliminated all these real small dyeing houses, you know, because the effluents that were going into the rivers and causing all these issues. And what remained were the larger dyeing houses with the larger dyeing tanks. How are they managing these smaller minimums with the absence of literally thousands of smaller dyeing companies that were forced closed due to the pollution controls? Did you see any ways around
I
that?
didn't, but from my understanding, a lot of that is moving up north.
Okay.
You know, areas like Ningbo now that at once Anhui, when we talked about.
Oh
was
my
once-
God, I remember Anway's all fields,
Yeah, and
agriculture.
and
And
now
you were just in Anway.
right,
And you showed me a picture, and I could not believe that was Anway.
Right. And I talked to them about that, and they told me I went to a completely vertical mill factory. You know, they spin their own yarns, bring their own cotton, spin their own yarns. Do
Probably
the,
grow it out in the field outside.
yeah, try to stay away from those places. So anyhow, they're completely vertical except for dyeing. They said that they cannot dye in their province or in their
Okay.
particular municipal city.
So they have to ship that out and ship it to a central dye.
So they're able to do every part of the process except for dyeing.
Yeah.
And that's evidently been addressed. So they're figuring out how to do that.
You know, I give you a lot of credit. You know, I've said for the years, as much as I've tried when I've traveled, that speaking the language of the country, you speak the heart language, you get to know the people better. And Mandarin is the Everest of languages. I guess maybe they think American is, but I would tell you my experience in Mandarin, saying everything wrong, that's the Everest of languages. And you went into immersive language learning when you were in the country, right?
Yeah, I studied an offshoot of Qingdao University. It was a kind of an off-campus location where I studied, a little bit of writing and reading and language. The writing has been tremendously
Writing's
hard.
tough.
Yeah, because you can't stand out a character.
No, right.
Cat. You know, it's a character.
Right. I would draw a cat. That would be easier for me.
So what I do now is I actually, is to kind of release the tensions at night and so forth. I practice my Hansa, which is the technical term for writing, and I do about 200 characters a night.
And how many
Wow.
characters are there? Something like 10,000 or something?
50,000.
50,000?
Wow.
Holy
Yeah,
smokes.
but they say you can read a newspaper if you can get your arms around about 2,000.
Seriously,
About 2,000 are used daily.
that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I got as far as learning all the bad words because that's the first thing
Yeah,
they teach
that's
you.
the first.
And then like every buyer needs to learn Taekwondo because that's too expensive, right? Something like that.
Taekwondo.
Taekwondo, yeah. So those are the things, that's the extent of what I did. Sheshe,
Right. No. It's. I was telling Emily after not being there for 4 years, I was pretty much throwing out a word salad. I was just throwing it out there, and they'd be like, "No, you don't need to get a deposit from the hospital. I think you meant to say bank." Yeah, I need to go to the bank. So it's a tough language, but it's. They're very good about correcting you.
And do they feel like you get credit for that you're really trying?
Oh, yeah, they lie to me a lot. Oh, your Chinese is so good. You must be local. Like, right, yeah. All I said was ni hao.
Yeah.
Oh, your Chinese is great.
Oh, that's so sweet.
But it's
it really
cute.
is. Are there any other kind of cultural insights that you've found to be helpful in practice as you've done business?
At one point, you always gave a business card with 2 hands and accepted it with 2 hands. I don't see as much of that anymore.
Drinking copious amounts of Mau Tai.
Yeah, and smoking numerous cigarettes. Here, every guy in the restaurant just wants to say hi to the foreigner.
Yeah.
And the way to break the ice is, hey, here, have this, or have a shot. And,
Yeah.
So,
I remember that. For years, I thought it was my obligation to drink that stuff.
yeah.
No offense to those that love Mau Tai, but
Right.
the recovery was tough.
Yeah. I had dated a girl whose family had the licensee to Mau Tai in a small province in Guizhou.
Wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't really good for my travels, but it was.
Just circling back, one final question I have for you with regards to the apparel manufacturing side of things. You started talking about dyeing and so forth, the garments, and when we were in India a couple times over the last year, we saw a lot of strides happening with regards to sustainability, and I'm curious what is happening in China with regards to sustainability. Is it a focus? Is it an initiative?
It's when I worked in the factories, very little was wasted.
Oh,
I mean, when our fabric rolls would be taken off the truck and they're wrapped in plastic, or it could be cardboard and you have the binding and so forth, we'd have piles of plastic and cardboard, and we'd save everything, whether it was from lunch boxes, lunch, and they'd have some guy come up in a truck every 2 weeks with a scale, and they'd weigh the plastic and they'd weigh the paper, and he'd buy it.
okay.
For recycling. For
They were
reusable.
this was 10 years ago. They were recycling everything that came through that factory.
That's great.
Yeah. So even the fabric that was left over at the end of a cutting or something, you got 33, 50 yards left over, they'd sell that to a consignment shop or whatever that would use it for their manufacturing or selling in a store for family members to make clothes for their children. So that was even rolled up and saved and labeled as how many yards. And
That's great.
yeah, so
So it's not necessarily a hang tag. It really is a whole philosophy there.
yeah, no, it's
Isn't that great?
everything, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your insights. Is there anything else you think that everybody should learn from our conversation from your recent visit today?
And I think especially too that, we get caught up in the politics and the news every day about China, and literally every week we get conversations about people like, I want to bail from China and I want to move elsewhere. These are real human beings with lives that depend on this, that have invested in the apparel game. This isn't a government engine. These are lives and human lives. Being someone that's an advocate of China and that's lived there for a long time and understanding what's happening on the ground now, what should people know about the real people of China and the real manufacturing in China, and take with them in their consideration of life as a balance, right?
People are people. They want respect. They want to make friends. They want a good life like you do. And basically, they're just people.
And they care.
And
we're finding that a lot of these groups really do care. They do a great job. Yeah. As we have those dialogues about people wanting to wholesale abdicate China, I'm always reticent to support the function because, one, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Life is about a portfolio. And while there are issues literally in every country, including ours, there are other ways to solve the issues that impact the economy of the everyday person. We're not the apparel industry, I would say, isn't the wealthiest industry in the world overall. There's some people in the industry that certainly do enjoy the luxury of, fine higher level stuff. But the majority of our industry is pretty basic. I mean, we're average working people trying to get things done, overcome insurmountable issues in the world, and they're no different. And so, I'm thankful that you're on the program today, and we certainly solicit more information or questions about this, but life is a balance. Don't try to just jump wholesale into one thing. It's about making methodical moves and making sure that the decisions that you make, there are ramifications everywhere. And so, don't knee jerk. Care about people, get over the politics part of it.
Absolutely. And then look at your everyday life, things, the products you use, the products you love. I know you shouldn't love things, but people are attached to their iPhones or their Dyson vacuums or their, and just don't jump on that bandwagon and say, no, I don't have a problem with the quality. It's, it served me well.
And realize that we don't have an infrastructure. There's been a big push in general to build America, buy America. And that all makes sense if you have an infrastructure for it. I remember talking with a senior member of a large organization, and a lot of what they do, these tiny little fasteners, these metal fasteners that connect the world. And one night we were dialoguing about that, and they bring all those in from China. And he said, do you know how much time it would take to replace the demand we have on this little tiny fastener that connects literally all sorts of objects in our world? And I didn't have an idea. I had a few guesses. And he said 8 to 10 years, and it would be 10 times the cost, to do that. And
so, the investment to build it.
And the investment. There's just no infrastructure. So we have to be really careful about decisions we make that have much larger impacts in our economy and the global economy.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I am going to drop a little note to share with people. One of the many talents that you have, in addition to being very well versed in in Mandarin, is Michael is an extraordinary photographer. And in fact, at Stars Design Group, we feature a lot of his photography taken on the ground while spending time in China. And so I think we'll make sure to share some of those photos in our socials as a result of this recording today. But definitely take a look at it. You'll see a little bit about what we're talking about, the human side of the world. So
thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe to stay apprised of upcoming episodes of Clothing Culture.